Destiny 2 was meant to receive at least 2 more expansions following the release of Renegades. These expansions were Shattered Cycle and The Alchemist, but with the end of live service for Destiny 2, these expansions were completely cancelled. The tragic part is that developers were working on these 2 projects until the announcement of the end of live service on May 21st, 2026. With the Monument of Triumph update, the narrative team seemed to have brought some of the lore from Shattered Cycle forward. So, in this video, we're going to take a look at the lore for Shattered Cycle, and start to piece together the story for this lost expansion. Before we get into the actual meat of the lore we got with Monument of Triumph, let's first refresh our knowledge on everything surrounding the Shattered Cycle expansion, as even before this update, we knew where the story was heading, and we could already make some predictions about the main characters and story beats. Which takes us to the Infinity Universe and the world of Aristia. Wait, this isn't something from Destiny. No. This is the enthralling world of Infinity Hexadome Tactics, a new competitive strategy game set in the Infinity Universe, launching on September 10th of this year. I know you're probably itching to skip this segment, but guys, don't. You're gonna want to hear what comes next. And thank you Infinity Hexadome Tactics for sponsoring this video. Hexadome Tactics brings the classic tabletop wargame Infinity to PC for the very first time. Infinity is a rich sci-fi universe, set in a future where humanity has expanded across the galaxy, resulting in a variety of factions, characters, and conflicts. Throughout the campaign, you will lead your team across the Infinity Universe, taking you to different arenas inspired by the human sphere. From the sprawling cities of Pan-Oceania to the oasis landscapes of Haqqislam, each arena is deeply connected to the broader universe and offers distinct layouts, objectives, and challenges. You can choose from 12 unique champions. Each of the 12 champions are built around a special mechanic. This leads to some pretty cool build crafting, and through the use of tactical cards, other abilities, and teamwork, you can completely change how these heroes operate. For example, take the named play Bloodbath, where the champion Miyamoto Musashi pulls the Parvati ultimate card, causing the two to switch places, allowing Parvati to heavily damage 2 enemy champions. Want to jump into the Hexadome before launch? There are still several ways to get free early access. Request access to the tournament build through the official Hexadome Discord and compete in upcoming tournaments with Steam gift cards and other prizes coming soon. And join the Steam playtest running from August 11th to the 18th, the last one before launch. From narrative campaigns, competitive PvP, or casual matches, this game offers so many different ways to master its champions and experience the Infinity Universe. In the description, you can find the Steam page and a Discord link for the game, and check out Hexadome's full release on September 10th. I'll see you in the arena. For starters, we knew that Shattered Cycle was going to take place in Old Chicago. This is a location that has been teased for a decade at this point. Throughout the years, there have been references here and there about Old Chicago, and now, in Shattered Cycle, we were going to finally unravel those threads. So, what do we know? Old Chicago was a prominent city in both the pre-Golden Age and Golden Age eras of humanity. During the Space Age, the 1960s, Chicago was home to Hockey Heavy Industries, the predecessor to the last city foundry known as Hockey, and the Department of External Observations, a branch of the United States government in charge of investigating extraterrestrial occurrences and interdimensional anomalies. Louis Yero, who we know as Lodi, and Dr. Nella Davis, who we know as Ikora, were employees of the DEO. And the DEO got into a lot of strange stuff. They investigated some strange material and a weird weapon tied to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which the Graviton Lance was seemingly based on. They investigated alien crash sites in the Swiss Alps, and even discovered a spherical object in deep space, which they labeled as X0192, and estimated that it would take about 50 to 60 years to arrive in the solar system. This object was of course the Traveler. Of all their strange discoveries, which we'll really get into later in this video, the most prominent of which was the Nine. Now, they couldn't exactly explain what the Nine actually were. All they had found was a phone underneath Chicago. A phone that linked to a signal from deep space, and would severely alter and change people who interacted with it. Around this time, Yero would begin to experience strange dreams, which ultimately lured him to this phone in the DEO offices. And when he picked up the phone, he became unstuck in time. He was pulled from the space age all the way into the city age after the death of the witness. He was pulled hundreds and hundreds of years into the future. And shortly after Lewis vanished, Nella Davis was killed in a bizarre train crash, and her body was displaced, sent to a desert somewhere on Earth. Both employees were thought to be missing. But the truth is, the Nine had taken away Yero, and the Nine had killed Nella Davis in the train wreck so that she would be in the right place to be revived by her ghost hundreds of years in the future. This was all in the deep past. Following the collapse, old Chicago was ruined, and over time, nature reclaimed the city. Chicago sunk into a deep swamp, and all the horrors and mysteries held there were lost to time. That is, until Guardians began to investigate the area. One Guardian discovered the Graviton Lance somewhere in the city. Another fire team went into the catacombs of the city, deep underground, and discovered a very weird creature that was strong enough to permanently kill Guardians. It was a monster that these Guardians had never seen before, so we can only speculate as to what it actually was. But we can start to put things together, and we'll discover that the DEO might have kept something locked away in their chambers. We also have heard about a fabled King of Chicago, seemingly a guardian who has taken the city as his kingdom and has vowed to protect humanity from a foul beast that is located there. Now, our mentions of the King of Chicago are a little strange. The first comes from a play that the Ghost Community Theater put on, and so it has to be taken with a little grain of salt here. But it does align with what we know about Chicago. We know that Chicago's in ruins, and this play talks about the Seared Tower, which seems to reference the Sears Tower of Chicago. And our other mention of the King of Chicago comes from Dredgen Bale. He was researching old myths and tales and legends, one of which is the King of Chicago. So I think we might have actually met the King of Chicago in this expansion. And the events of Edge of Fate and Renegades also started to build up Shattered Cycle and Old Chicago. In the Edge of Fate, we came to learn the backstory of Lodi and how the Nine selected him to be their new emissary, a vessel for the Nine to speak through. At the end of the Edge of Fate, we learned that Maya Sundaresh had killed 3, the member of the Nine that was bound to Earth, and we learned that this death would set off a series of events that would lead to extinction. But we were also told by 3 itself that in order to survive this extinction, we have to bind the Nine. In a side quest, Lodi also revealed that he was given a vision of our Guardians standing in Lake Michigan, one of the North American Great Lakes, in a body of water that is right next to Chicago. Later in Renegades, Lodi began to experience strange visions of some creature that was trapped underground, and this creature was trying to claw its way out. Take a listen to what Lodi says at the end of Renegades.
My gut is screaming that we prevent extinction by stopping the Nine from altering fate. Bind the Nine by binding each of them to a body. And I know where we can start. There's something that's been trying to talk to me, and when I talk back, all I can remember is how it felt to channel 3. It's dangerous, and worst part is, I know exactly where it is. Adams and Wabash. It's under Chicago. I'm going to ask Ikora to scout it out first. We can meet up with her there. Guardian, I don't want to go home, but I'm certain whatever 9 we bind first is there. I can't go there without Ikora. I can't go there without you.
So we learn a lot of things here. Bind the Nine means binding them to physical bodies to stop them from being able to change the future. Because when a member of the Nine occupies a vessel, they cannot alter the future. Lodi reveals that the creature that he keeps getting visions from is trapped under Chicago, and communing with this creature feels just like how it felt to channel 3. So this creature is linked to 3 in some way. And this also suggests that this is the same creature that those Guardians found trapped in the catacombs of Chicago. 3's death also caused the Earth to suffer wild transformations and transmutations, the most saturated of which are located at the Great Lakes. And also in Renegades, Lodi communed with the member of the Nine bound to Mars, 4, and he told him something very interesting.
Speak plainly, 4 of the Nine. What's the nature of your binding? What extinction does 3's death ensure?
Bring 3 to the well, my emissary, for one point 8795 Borean polarity. 87.6260 opponent. The bottom of the labyrinth.
The labyrinth.
Emissary, what were those numbers?
They were latitude and longitude that howled like a wolf. It's home. Something is under Chicago.
4 gives Lodi a set of coordinates, which when you search up, brings you to the intersection of Adams Wabash and Chicago, the same place where the DEO headquarters was located. And underneath this building seems to be a labyrinth, and Lodi must bring 3 to a well that's somewhere at the depths of this labyrinth. So something big is under Chicago. Earlier this year, I went to Chicago for a wedding, and made some time to actually visit this set of coordinates, to see if I could find anything there and just to kind of experience this place mentioned in Destiny lore. It was just a normal train station, with some trains that looked just like the trains that hit Lodi and Ikora in their respective cutscenes. It was pretty fun, and my brother and I got some really cool footage that I wanted to use in a video going over the entire Shattered Cycle story and kind of compare the Adams and Wabash and overall Chicago of today to the Adams and Wabash and Chicago of Destiny. But yeah, unfortunately, that is not going to happen anymore because we're not going to get Chicago in Destiny, at least for right now. Hopefully, fingers crossed, Destiny 3 comes and they put Chicago as a destination in there, and I can finally make that video. But anyway, this is everything we knew about Shattered Cycle up until Monument of Triumph. The DEO, Lodi, Ikora, the King of Chicago, 3, this labyrinth and everything going on under Chicago, and of course, this really weird creature. And with the Monument of Triumph update, we got more insights into some of these threads. But unfortunately, other things have now become unsolved mysteries. That is, until hopefully this story gets picked up in the future. There are 2 lore books in particular that were added with this release that really unpack key elements of Shattered Cycle. These books are Assumption and Recovered Materials Old Chicago. Let's first take a look at the Assumption lore book, a story that dives into the life of Louis Yero, who we know as Lodi. So, this lore book is about Lodi re-experiencing past moments and memories from throughout his life, as he describes his thoughts and feelings at those different times, and ultimately, how the 9 were always there. This takes us into the first chapter, Lodi, Wisconsin, 1929. In this first chapter, Louis is 4 or 5 years old, and he's hanging out with his family, meeting the world for the first time. His uncle Tomas points out a giant biplane in the sky named Jenny, something that Louis is completely fascinated by, thinking that it is the prettiest thing in the world. He says that he'd like to be up there in the clouds one day, and his brother, Ben, says he wants to as well. Their uncle has a thin mustache, keeps his hat at an angle, and wears a silk scarf. He tells the 2 brothers that he'll take them up there, that they'll be higher than the angels, and will be able to see what God sees. Jenny roars overhead once again, and Lodi thinks about his family.
I like all their names. They stick. Like they're never going to go anywhere. Not without me.
This entry cements the relationship Louis has with his family. He loves them all so much, and comments how they are never going to go anywhere, not without him. Keep that line in mind, because it's going to be a driving through line throughout this whole book. Chapter 2, Assumption, Illinois, 1938. Louis is now 13 years old. He's stolen his pop's truck, and alongside his brother Ben, they are going to see Uncle Tomas. They've run out of gas, and are forced to walk to a gas station. Ben points at a sign, and learns that they've arrived in a small town called Assumption, a name that reminds Ben of Mass. Beyond the sign is a strange figure, who swaggers toward them, limping. The sight of this figure causes a feeling of dread to overcome Louis. Nausea swirls like a sickness in the back of his throat.
Cold air, like what I imagine the sky to taste like. Acrid coal. I feel a buzzing thing shoot through me, and a sunburn from the inside out.
My name is Garden and Cradle, and the mass by which all other bodies are measured. And I am your mother. Do not be afraid. Ask me a question before death hastens me from this moment. Screaming is not a question, dear one. Ben will be fine. You will not cause him insurmountable pain. One more question. No, dear one. I cannot. Blindless is your fate, though you will see into the great beyond.
Lou, oh God, wake up! Holy Mother, wake up!
Ben slaps me and I wake up screaming. Ben pulls me into an embrace. I can feel his heart beating against mine. He clutches his pocket knife in a trembling fist, blade stabbing toward Assumption. One day, I'll understand that his fear was not of the thing we saw, but of what it could have done to me.
Was that the devil?
We part. I don't think it was something holy either. I think it was a third thing.
So this entry is pretty wild, and it sets the tone for the rest of the lore book. But essentially, Lewis and Ben encounter a strange figure in the town Assumption, and that figure seems to knock Lewis out cold for a moment. This figure speaking is without a doubt 3, who is probably using someone as a vessel to get the message across to Lewis. We know that this is 3 by what she says, and also by how she speaks. This figure speaks in all lowercase, no punctuation, the same pattern as 3. And when Lewis is knocked out, he seems to be transported into some place or time where he can speak to 3 directly. And in this really weird space or place in time, we don't hear what Lewis says. We only get to read 3's responses to Lewis's questions. At first, Lewis seems to constantly scream, but then seems to ask about Ben, which elicits this response. Ben will be fine, you will not cause him insurmountable pain. I hope that makes sense. There's a dialogue, a back and forth happening between Lewis and 3, but we are only reading 3's responses. 3 introduces herself as Garden and Cradle, and says that she is his mother, like a Mother Earth type of figure, as she views all of humanity as her children. That Garden and Cradle title is also very interesting. It may be a reference to a poem called Garden and Cradle, written by Eugene Field sometime in the late 1800s. This poem is about a child walking in his garden and swinging in his cradle. In the garden, he makes gentle music, and the sunbeams and posies bow down to him like a king. And in the cradle, he gazes at the night sky, as the stars and the moon are kind to him. And the moon gives him a golden crown and sings him the wind and the gentle song of Bethlehem Town. The Bethlehem Town seems to be a reference to the town of Bethlehem, the place where Jesus Christ was born. Pairing that with the imagery of gentle kingship in this garden seems to paint this child as a Christ-type figure. The child's world is serene, peaceful, and loving, and its parents, which seem to be these celestial figures, are happy. But back to 3, she wants Lewis to ask her questions before death takes her from this moment, which I think is a clear reference to the events of Edge of Fate. Remember, Maya Sundaresh killed 3 sometime before Edge of Fate, but then 3 was resurrected for a brief moment by the Drifter, so that she could give us her last message, before she died once again. So perhaps in this window before death, she grabbed Lewis and spoke to him for just a moment. She concludes by saying that his fate is seemingly certain, but he will see in the great beyond, which seems to refer to his ability as an emissary and how he can peer down the valley of time thanks to the 9. And one last thing about this figure, right before Lewis is taken into this very strange plane of reality, he feels cold air and the taste of acrid coal. Keep that in mind because that acrid coal is something that reoccurs throughout this entire lore book. There's another interesting thing to take a look at in this entry, and that is the nature of the name of the town, Assumption. The name reminds Ben of Assumption at Mass, which is a direct reference to Mass in Catholicism, the main Eucharistic liturgy and act of worship. The Assumption of Mary is a Catholic dogma which posits that Mary, the mother of Jesus, had her body and soul taken up into heaven at the end of her life. And some interpret that Mary didn't actually suffer a bodily death, but was raised to eternal life instead. The word Assumption comes from the Latin word meaning to take up. And so the town Assumption reminds Ben of this teaching. And I think it also serves to foreshadow the future of Lewis. He also had an Assumption at the end of his life in the space age. He didn't suffer a bodily death. He was taken up, in a way, by the Nine. Chapter 3. Holland, Occupied Netherlands, 1944. Lewis is now 20 years old. He's fighting for the Allies in World War II, and has just been shot down in German-occupied Netherlands. He's trapped in his fighter aircraft, with broken ribs, few rations, and a pistol. He starts to go through the languages he knows. Spanish won't help because of his Jalisco accent. He's regretting not learning Dutch. His brother told him to learn it, but he decided not to because the Dutch girls he wanted spoke French. He decides to speak with French and English if he sees anyone. But if he sees anyone who is German, he's unsure if he'll survive. Because even though he knows Wisconsin German, he'd sound like a time traveler, and they would not show him mercy. He falls asleep and wakes up to the rushing of water into his cockpit. He worries about drowning in the plane. He shouts for help, calling out in French and English. And there comes footsteps, familiar footsteps, along with an acrid stink that he first thinks is the smell of his plane on fire, but it's not. It is the smell of coal. He wakes up again with hands all over him. He says he's American in French, and the men tell Lewis that they are friends and that he is safe. So, Lewis crash lands in German territory, and his fate seems to be sealed at this point. But seemingly, 3 intervenes, and he's saved by allies instead. What clues us in on this is the acrid stink like coal. That is the same sort of thing that accompanied the presence of 3 in Assumption. Acrid coal. Chapter 4. Peenemünde, German Democratic Republic, 1954. In this entry, Lewis is 29 years old and stationed in the German Democratic Republic about 10 years after the end of World War II. World War II ended in 1945, and this entry takes place in 1954. For a bit of historical context, Germany was divided into occupation zones following the end of World War II. This separated Germany into 2 main states, East and West Germany, and Berlin was divided among Allied countries. East Germany quickly became a communist territory, a satellite state for the Soviet Union, which would be known as a German Democratic Republic. Peenemünde was an area involved in the development of V-1 and V-2 rockets for Nazi Germany. This location was subject to a variety of Allied bombings, and it was ultimately captured by the Soviet Red Army. This all will be important to know for this entry. So, in the middle of the night, Lewis is sent to Peenemünde. He's commonly sent out on these missions at night, and the company has given him the name of Orlok because of it, a reference to the 1922 film Nosferatu. As he approaches the area, an odd figure gets out of a truck and limps into a building. Lewis follows, pistol drawn, as, quote, something gravitational draws him deeper in. A voice with a gentle German accent asks Lewis if he's American, British, or Dutch, with Lewis telling him that he's an American, but he does not holster his pistol. Lewis follows the voice to the middle of the factory floor. The only light in the room comes from a single lantern that sits on a table, revealing a man smoking a cigarette and a chair opposite of him. The man gestures for Lewis to sit, but he refuses and tries to make conversation. But Lewis quickly gets to the point. Lewis asks where a person known as Dr. Hoyer is, with the man responding that he's dead. The man then curses in Russian and asks Lewis if he understands the language, with Lewis saying that he's still learning his Russian. No longer just a man with a gentle German accent, the text now identifies him as the Soviet. Lewis then sits in the chair, as the Soviet says that Dr. Hoyer was a fascist, and that they took him out after they captured his rockets. So seemingly, Dr. Hoyer was connected to this V-2 launch site, and the Soviets captured it and then killed him. The Soviet says that Hoyer was killed in 1945, the same year World War II ended. Given the fact that the Soviet calls him a fascist, and the fact 1945 was the year the Soviet Red Army captured Peenemünde, as well as the end of World War II, Hoyer was probably a Nazi doctor that was killed when the Soviet Red Army captured the island. Because remember, Peenemünde was a Nazi Germany facility for the V-1 and V-2 rockets. So once this is revealed, Lewis sits in the chair, and the conversation becomes a bit more relaxed. There's an important detail in their exchange, as Lewis says, "Thanks, my brother," in response to the Soviet complimenting his Russian. The Soviet asks him to continue practicing, specifically with him, and this offer completely stuns Lewis.
The immensity of the offer stuns me. I see a different life. One lonely but wild, in a red world far more ancient than my own. A different tongue, a different set of stars. I am alone, but special.
Lewis then tells the Soviet that he cannot do that, with the text clarifying that this was a lie. The Soviet says that's a pity, and instructs Lewis to leave, as helicopters approach and Lewis runs. So, this offer to continue learning Russian was not simply just an offer for sharpening his dialect. There was something more under the surface, and Lewis bailed. There's quite a bit to unpack here. So, this Soviet was initially posing as a German, but quickly revealed that he was a Soviet, and that realization made Lewis a lot more relaxed. So, either Lewis is a secret Soviet, or he's posing as a Soviet and is working undercover. That would explain the usage of "my brother" to signal camaraderie, and how he became a lot more relaxed once he realized that this was a Soviet and not a German, because his life was not in danger anymore. He's working undercover for the American government. And like with all these entries, there is a hidden presence of 3 or the 9 as a whole. First, some sort of gravity pulls Lewis into the building, seemingly a nod to the 9, who are bound to the gravities of the celestial bodies of our system. And this entire lorebook has been priming us as readers to look out for stuff that hint and connect to the 9. So that usage of the word gravity is without a doubt a connection to the 9. And when he gets hit with that offer to continue practicing his Russian, he immediately sees a different life. I don't really know exactly what this is referring to, I'll be honest. One possibility is that he saw a vision of his future as Lodi. He's in a red world, which could refer to Mars, as it is known as the Red Planet. And this world is described as far more ancient than my own, seemingly because of the hundreds and hundreds of years that have gone by since the Golden Age. In this world, he's alone, but special, which is how Lewis feels as Lodi. He has a special purpose, as the emissary of the 9, but still is lonely, because his family, friends, and entire world have been lost to time. Chapter 5, Pine Ridge Reservation, South Dakota, 1960. Lewis is now 35 years old in South Dakota, and he stands on an aircraft carrier that is manifested in a lonely ravine. This is already very strange, as aircraft carriers are deployed on waters, oceans, not in the middle of a reservation like this. A major greets Lewis, who asks if Director Moffat sent him, confirming that at this point, Lewis is now working for the DEO, and the major takes him to a lift, where he sees how the corpse of a Hellcat rots. This is not referencing a Dodge Hellcat car, but seemingly a Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighter used in World War II. Lewis puts on a respirator as they descend into the depths of this carrier. They walk through a dark corridor filled with particles in the air, following different voices. One of which is the voice of Lewis's brother, Ben, who is found fused to the wall. A saline drip runs into his right arm, while his left arm is, quote, lost inside the metal bulkhead with the lower half of his body. Medics attend to him, as Lewis is in a state of disbelief, thinking that this could not possibly be his brother. Ben is somehow halfway fused into the carrier. Half of his body sticks out of it, while the other half is trapped inside of this metal, almost like he's just straight up no-clipped into it. Lewis introduces himself as Agent Yero, and Ben recognizes that they have the same last name, but does not realize that he's speaking to his brother.
I'm Agent Yero. What's your name, Lieutenant?
Small world. We got the same last name. Really small world. Where am I?
South Dakota?
Oh, it's pretty far from the Pacific, huh?
That's where you were?
Yup. 3 days out from Formosa. Gonna wallop Mao's boys.
How did you get here?
One step at a time.
What ship is this?
The Hornet CV-8. Mighty old gal. You military? That suit looks out of place.
Army Air Corps. B-17s, then an F-5 during Market Garden.
My brother died on a B-17.
I'm sorry to hear that, Lieutenant. Does Assumption mean anything to you?
Who are you?
Please, Lieutenant. We don't have much time.
I saw the devil there. She walked up and gave me a kiss. She said I'd live for 80 years. I won't die here. The devil told me so.
He's dead. 10 minutes after you left. You handled that well. Family manifestations are tough.
That wasn't my brother.
A doppelganger, like the outbreak in 59.
No, the CV-8 sank in 43, and Ben was never at Formosa. This is something else. Tulpa, maybe.
But it knew what you were asking about it. Assumption?
It's a town. Ben and I saw something there as kids. It's a focal moment. Fixed time. Matter is constant. It repeats. And time happens in parallel. Deniable comms investigate the meaning of those fixed points. We think they have, external meaning.
Aliens?
Could be. Or ghosts. Other times. Other realities. I need a constant to help navigate phenomena. Ben is my constant. I know him. That wasn't Ben.
So, what was that?
Chirality? Variegation? Not sure. It depends on where I am observing this from. Major, the trash can, please. Oh, I think I'm gonna be sick.
Okay, so this conversation reveals so much. First of all, I went to unpack the nature of the Hornet aircraft carrier. Lewis notes how it manifested within the Pine Ridge Reservation, which again, I can't stress how weird it is because there is no body of water or anything like that in the Pine Ridge Reservation. It's a bunch of cliffs, rock formations, sand hills, trees, you know, something you'd expect in South Dakota, not a giant aircraft carrier. It was an abnormal manifestation. And upon this Hornet aircraft carrier sits a Hellcat fighter, which seems to refer to a Grumman F-6F Hellcat, an old fighter craft from World War II. Now, they talk about how this is a USS Hornet CV-8, which is an actual aircraft carrier used by the United States in World War II. It was deployed in the Pacific Theater, specifically in the Doolittle Raid and the Battle of Midway. The USS Hornet was taken out and sunk by the Japanese in 1943, where it was abandoned and forsaken to the seas. In 2019, the Hornet was found near the Solomon Islands. And this does align with Lewis's timeline, where he confirms that the CV-8 did in fact sink in 1943. But this Tulpa variant of Ben claims otherwise. He says that he was on board the USS Hornet on the way to Formosa to battle against Mao Zedong. Remember, he's talking about the USS Hornet CV-8, this specific version that was sunk in 1943. But here, he's going to battle Mao Zedong with it. Now, for some quick historical context, Formosa is another name for Taiwan. In 1960, Mao Zedong was the main leader of the People's Republic of China under the Chinese Communist Party. Chiang Kai-shek was the former leader of the Republic of China, who ruled China during World War II. Following World War II, the second phase of the Chinese Civil War took place, which forced Chiang Kai-shek to relocate his government of the Republic of China to Taiwan. As Mao Zedong and the CCP took over mainland China, tensions would rise over the course of the decade, as Taiwan feared an invasion by Mao Zedong. The Formosa Resolution of 1955 was even passed by the United States Senate, which gave the president, at the time, Dwight D. Eisenhower, the power to defend Taiwan with military forces in the event of an invasion. Quote, that the President of the United States be and he hereby is authorized to employ the armed forces of the United States as he deems necessary for the specific purpose of securing and protecting Formosa and the pescadores against armed attack. The United States military even had a presence on Taiwan with the United States Taiwan Defense Command that operated from 1954 to 1979. Now, the thing is, there was no full-blown military conflict against Mao Zedong over Formosa. In June 1960, Eisenhower visited Taiwan, which caused Mao's People's Liberation Army to fire 100,000 artillery rounds onto the island of Kinmen. But the United States did not retaliate. So, Ben seems to be referring to a conflict that never existed, and was on board the USS Hornet CV-8, a carrier that sunk in the 1940s alongside Hellcat fighter planes, which of my knowledge, the Hornet never actually carried, to battle Mao Zedong's forces near Formosa, aka Taiwan, a conflict that again didn't exist. And on top of that, this Ben believed Lewis had died on a B-17. So, seemingly, this Ben's Lewis died in World War II. Lewis later even confirms that Ben was never at Formosa, and the USS Hornet CV-8 did in fact sink in 1943. Something is definitely different about this Ben, but yet, this Ben has an eerie reaction to the reference of Assumption. Lewis talks about their shared experience in the town Assumption, and Ben notes that this is where the devil kissed him, and said he'd live for 80 years. Lewis notes how Ben only saw the sunrise, while he saw the sun. Lewis had interacted with this vessel, but Lewis actually spoke to 3. So, something is very wrong here. The Major speaks about how this could be a doppelganger, comparing it to the doppelganger outbreak in 1959. Which, what do you mean there was a doppelganger outbreak in 1959? I want to know more about that story. But Lewis first posits that this Ben could be a tulpa, which in mysticism is a materialized being, or a thought form, that takes a human shape. Essentially, it's something abstract materialized in human form, not a real human. Lewis later unpacks the meaning behind Assumption, and how he views it as a focal moment in fixed time, something that is constant that continues to repeat and happen in parallel. They seem to have external meaning that might relate to other realities or times. Seemingly, time has these fixed constant points, and to Lewis, Ben is his constant. This Ben wasn't the real one, it wasn't his constant. The text compares it to chirality, which is where an object is chiral if it is not identical to its mirror image. This Ben might look and act like Ben, but it's chiral. It's slightly off, and therefore not identical, not really Ben. But it's very interesting that Lewis kind of views Assumption as a fixed moment in time. Assumption seems to be an event that always happens across a variety of timelines, and it's unknown if this alternate Ben is a true human or not, because while he might be a tulpa like Lewis theorizes, he could also be a Ben from a different timeline, and we'll get into why that might be in just a little bit. As Lewis investigates this matter, his head pounds. Static ink blots spread across his vision, waves of nausea hit him, and that smell of coal is there. And then suddenly, he feels as if he's trillions of years old. The Nine's presence is more aggressive now, as we get closer and closer to his abduction. But still, there's a lingering mystery regarding what happened at Assumption. Clearly something happened to Ben too. Let's keep digging. Chapter 6. Lodi, Wisconsin, 1962. Lewis is now 37 years old. His hands are cold, and he's beginning to know what to expect. His father's dead, and he's planning to tell Ben about everything, in order to, quote, make an anchor we can both hang on to. Ben in their father's truck comes around the corner of a street. He looks like their father now. It's been a while since Lewis has last seen him. He steps out of the car, and asks if he's okay. Lewis realizes this is the moment that he has to tell him everything.
Hey, Lou.
believe the old thing still runs.
You okay, Lou?
I don't know how to keep things straight. How to talk about it.
Well, we're talking right now. I'm your older brother. I'm also a damn good doctor with a valid script pad. What's ailing you?
I feel like some mean bastard up there is hammering a wedge between us. And a different bruiser is whacking the wedge the other way. I'm sorry, I'm all mixed up.
I know.
You remember when we stole that?
Well, we ran out of gas near some small town.
Assumption.
Did we ever actually make it to Uncle Tomas? I can't recall.
Not yet. You remember what found us? That third thing?
What did it say to you?
That everything is gonna be okay. If you can believe that.
Hey, come to dinner tonight.
Already there.
So, this entry seems to reveal everything about what happened in Assumption. At this time in 1962, Lewis is seemingly experiencing strange dreams and visions from the Nine. We read about these in the Time Lost DEO documents, which told us that Lewis was trying to meet with a doctor, but that kind of fell apart. It looks like his brother Ben was the only person he could truly confide in. In their conversation, Lewis comes to the realization that Ben understands him. He understands the nature of the meeting with that third thing at Assumption. 3. The usage of the phrase third thing is particularly interesting, because in the Centering Lore book, Dredgen Bale describes the Nine as a third power. But Lewis says how they are each other's constant, and were minted or bound together at Assumption. This continues to hammer in the point that even across a variety of timelines and futures, Ben is a figure that Lewis can always point back to. And Ben carries a fatigue that is, quote, the same as the nameless weight I cannot find words for. Lewis carries this nameless weight that Ben also carries, and that is seemingly the presence of the Nine. It seems like on that day on the road to Assumption, both Lewis and Ben were Nine-touched, and I think that's the fatigue that they share. And the moment at Assumption is eternal, a fixed point in time. It happened before and will happen again. It is always happening. And the text describes how the two of them are known by the beasts of the Dark Forest. The Dark Forest hypothesis is an answer to the Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox is the inconsistency between the lack of evidence of intelligent alien life and the high likelihood of their existence. The Dark Forest hypothesis posits that there is an abundance of alien civilizations in the universe, but they stay silent and hidden, fearing that if they reveal themselves, they would be annihilated by a far more advanced and dangerous civilization. So, these alien civilizations keep themselves hidden, out of fear of each other. And so in this entry, Lewis and Ben understand that there are advanced aliens out there in the universe. They interacted with a third thing at Assumption, something not of this world. And these entities are aware of these two brothers. That must be a terrifying thought for Lewis to have in this moment, because also he's starting to experience these visions and dreams relating to the Nine. This is right before his abduction. For the first time, they made noise in the Dark Forest, and something else, something dangerous, had turned their heads. The beasts of the Dark Forest, the Nine, knew about Ben and Lewis.
I'm back. I know when this is. I'm 30 trillion years old. Hey, Ben. Welcome back. Oh, I missed you too. I found you. I'm sorry it took so long. I lost myself for a bit, but I felt you out here. I'm stretched between epiphany and confusion, but at this moment, you're meeting me when I know how to introduce myself again. Call me Lodi. It's an old nom de guerre. Yes, I know, it's the name of the town we grew up in. I was on the spot when they asked me, all right? Listen, All matter that is going to exist, exists. None of it can be destroyed. But it does change. Time dilates matter out beyond meaning. But it's not meaningless. It can all come back in time. I've been a constellation 3 degrees off the horizon. I'm the tail of a comet. I'm a coin tossed into the night. I'm the god who is your younger brother. And there's something we need to do. Help me find the rest of them. Betty, Philip, Benito, Fernanda, Mom, Pop, Uncle Tomas, all of them. Like I found you. God, Ben, I missed you too. Why now? Because now another star has kissed ours. Our solar system is going to die. It'll only take centuries. But our 9 worlds are going to be flung out into interstellar space. Whatever we are won't be able to stick around. So we gotta work fast. If we don't, our window closes. Our family still out there. I felt you out there and spent trillions of years putting you back together, building a monument of proof that it can be done. I've spent trillions of years leaning on you to carry me through this darkness. I spent that same amount of time alone, drowning in an ocean of time. But I learned something. An ocean is a single body. Everything in it. It's connected. Even if it's far apart. And at last, here you are. You're right next to me. Come on, quit crying. Now you've got me crying too. Thanks for being my constant, Ben. Now it's time for me to make it up to you. Clock's ticking. If we want to find everyone, we should get going. Everything's gonna be okay.
In this entry, Lewis is now 30 trillion years old. He's found a way to put Ben back together, atom by atom, and while it took an incomprehensible amount of time, he managed to do it. It's very similar to the way in which Orin rebuilt her body. She had to rebuild her body atom by atom after she broke away from the 9 and left her role as emissary. And I think what this entry is trying to say is that Lodi is now unbound by time. He does not experience time in a linear fashion anymore. He experiences the past, present, and future all at once. Every moment in his life has already happened, is currently happening, and will happen. The day in 1938 at Assumption is always happening. And so is a moment 30 trillion years into the future. To Lodi, it's all at once. He's always experiencing every moment in time. This is the philosophy of eternalism, which states that all existence in time is equally real. The past is just as real as the present, which is just as real as the future. This is in opposition to presentism, which presentism is the idea that the past is something that is fixed, with the future as something that is undefined, malleable. And under presentism, only the present exists, as when time passes, the moment that was just the present is now defined as the past, and what was once the future is now the current present. So, under this, the past and future aren't actually real. But eternalism argues that the past, the present, and the future all exist at once. To Lodi, there is no changing present, because his perception of time is now eternal, and everything exists all at once. Lodi even describes this state in our final conversation with him.
I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. It's 1929. I think that biplane is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I want to be up there. The 9 are going to come back and I'll stop them. They stretched me across time and didn't think I'd learn to use it for myself. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand. And eternity in an hour. See? It's 1962. And I'm in Lodi, Wisconsin. I feed ducks in the pond downtown. I drove there. My hands hurt from the cold. Dad's sitting next to me. It's years from now. And you've learned enough Welsh to do more than just curse. Your accent still needs work. I'm not going anywhere. I'll call you sometime, Guardian.
In this dialogue, he describes how he experiences moments in the past, like when he saw the big plane in the sky when he was a kid, like how he was waiting for Ben in 1962, and like how he's going to have a chat with our Guardian regarding our Welsh years in the future. To Lodi, everything is connected, no matter how far apart these things are. And with this perception of time, Ben is always a constant, because even though he's experiencing being 30 trillion years old, he's also experiencing being at Assumption with Ben in 1938. And so with this ability, he is always with his family, and he can even piece them back together. I don't think it's a mistake that his family, including himself and Ben, add up to 9 individuals. And he describes how extinction will take these 9 worlds of the solar system away. So I think there's a loose connection there between his family and the 9 in this extinction, but I don't really know what that could be, and this is kind of as far as we can go with this because we don't have the Shattered Cycle story, and we're not going to see where the Fate Saga was going to go in this, so it's kind of up in the air, up to your own interpretation. But ultimately, Ben is always a constant to Lodi. That's the main takeaway. No matter where or when Lodi is, his family and his brother are continued constants. And even as previous entries suggest that whatever happened at Assumption might have happened also to this alternate Ben, an event that always occurs over timelines, that does not change the relationship Lodi has with his Ben. Whether or not this alternate Ben is from another timeline, or is actually not a real human and in fact a tulpa, this alternate Ben can never replace his constant, true, and fixed Ben. A constant point in person that Lodi can connect with over the course of 1 trillion years. That is the story of Assumption, and it sets up a lot of mysteries and storylines regarding the future of Destiny, many of which we'll start to unpack with the next lore book. And it also goes to show how committed the writers were to the future of Destiny. But before we get into that lore book, we need to take a look at what the Traveler did to 3.
And here we are, through it all, your pale heart above, my nebulous form below cradle by, an eternity unforgiving. But I have always known you would come. Why, I can only imagine. You turned, and in that instant, light wisps and roils, blooming through our core. I feel your whisper of devotion on the wind. When you could have escaped into the shadows, never looking back, you struggled to pull me from the depths. Stretching through time, the eons swallow your sacrifice. Down, down, down. My mountains crumbling. My heart heavy, unable to see the stars. Once more, lulled to sleep, forever in paracausal suspense, and wonder as the universe can only look on. I cling to you, delicately poised, a precipice ready. And there we were.
The Traveler has returned to Earth and has begun to heal it. Remember, 3's death led to massive transmutations and physical transformations across Earth, and the Traveler is healing the planet. It's bringing Earth to a place where it isn't necessarily getting better, but it's not getting worse either. A stable period. And this process has seemingly revived 3, because we're getting this dialogue from 3 herself. The relationship between 3 and the Traveler is like a guardian and their ghost. The Traveler is acting as 3's ghost, and that is bringing her back to life. But because the planet is entering a bit of a transitory period, 3 is being lulled to sleep, kept in paracausal suspense. It's like the Lovecraftian being Azathoth, which 3's design clearly takes after. Azathoth is the lord of the Cthulhu mythos, and is the center of universal chaos. This god is kept asleep by the lull of music, which keeps the universe together, because if he awakes, everything will start to collapse. In a similar manner, 3 is lulled into sleep to keep the planet together. With that, let's take a look at what happened in Old Chicago. Recorded in the lore book, Recovered Materials, Old Chicago. Project Proposal, 1961. This entry begins with a message from Dr. Victor Falkner regarding a project proposal. He's a DEO employee, and he's pitching a new project, making the argument that since the DEO is looking to distant frontiers, they must prepare for survival at extremes and conditions hostile to human life, even more so than the conditions those at NASA face, as the DEO will venture into higher dimensions. These explorers must be ready and equipped for scientific inquiry, communication with unknown entities, and a directive to return home. This final bit about a way to return home references the Odysseus Protocol, the DEO protocol which is enacted in the event of extraterrestrial abduction. The tenets of the Odysseus Protocol are observe, connect, conceal, conform, comply, and return, which is the exact process Lodi followed during the initial stages of the Edge of Fate campaign. This is a reference to the Odyssey, and Odysseus' journey to return home. Dr. William Moffat, a leader of the DEO, responds to Falkner's project proposal. He praises Falkner and knows that he was just the sort of man he'd want in the Dead Zone department, and he says that while they have a bunch of fancy machinery, computers are still no substitute for boots on the ground research, which seems to be regarding seafloor activity. Moffat approves his proposal under the name Project Junction Advance. So, Victor Falkner is working for the DEO under the Dead Zone Department. The head of the Dead Zone Department is Dr. Purnell, and Moffat chose Falkner thanks to his work on the Nareda ADS. Nareda is the name of a Greek sea nymph, and Dead Zone, in environmental science, is the area of water in an ocean where oxygen levels are so small that they cannot support life. Seemingly, it has to do with the ocean and the sea, given also the reference to the seafloor in the project proposal. Magnetic audio tape, 1962.
These fools have been bickering about culture and anthropocentrism. They'll be at it for what matters to us, to you, is that they recovered 3 intact survival suits from Diablo Ray. I don't know if you have any questions.
Many.
The most pressing then.
Will I be allowed to see one of the suits?
See? Vic, you think... You're getting one of them, tubes and all. Not the wet stuff. Bio snatched that up. Some kind of silicone-based microorganism in suspension, they're saying. Leave him to it.
I did not believe it likely. You know,
Oh, don't get me wrong. Chem, biotech, R&D, even primes, for some reason, they all want a piece of the pie. And there's not enough slices for all of us. Moffat put the kibosh on giving one to Hake, in R&D at least. Guns won't do us any good if we're not alive to pull the trigger. And the directors never liked that guy in the first place. Chem and tech, other 2. The Diablo Ray suits, I don't know who they are, but that's a solved problem for humanity already. We're looking at the next frontier.
Trans-dimensional travel.
Get your people prepped to receive the materials, and just so we're clear, this isn't charity. I'm expecting great things from you, Vic.
Oh, I won't disappoint.
This entry is a follow-up to some pretty interesting lore we got in the Edge of Fate regarding an incident at Les Diablo. If you've been watching my videos for quite some time now, you've heard of this entry a few times before. This is the Melas Panoplia lore tab, and it's the one that has pretty much everything redacted. In short, some sort of alien crashed into Les Diablo of the Va Alps, and 4 DEO agents, including Director Moffat and a linguist, whose name was redacted, approached the aliens and initiated a protocol meant for friendly interaction. They captured these beings and brought them back to the DEO headquarters. Now, while the names of the agents beside Director Moffat were redacted in the original entry, we now know who these people are and the nature of the protocol they initiated thanks to the distortion weapons from Monument of Triumph. These weapons were 100% meant to be the Old Chicago destination guns, We know that because of the DEO logo plastered all over them, and how their names reference different places and incidents regarding the DEO, such as Diablo-Ray. And the flavor text on the Diablo-Ray 06 says this, quote, "Care with Xenia protocols. This is make or break stuff, people. Copy to Agents P. Adagal, M. Krajinovic, L. Yero." End quote. So, this confirms the name of the protocol they initiated at Diablo-Ray, which is the Xenia protocol, a Greek word which refers to a concept of hospitality, translated as guest friendship. And of course, the linguist that went with them was none other than Louis Yero, who we know as Lodi. So, the DEO tried to be hospitable to these aliens and befriend them. While we don't know what these aliens actually were, besides the fact that they were described as being burly and imposing, the entry in this lore book reveals that they carried something even more bizarre. Falkner and Purnell speak about 3 survival suits. These seem to be the suits worn by the DEO agents who investigated the crash site, and Falkner is receiving one, as his work hinges on the development of new suits for explorers to wear. And it seems like a strange liquid from the site got onto these suits, described as silicon-based microorganisms. This is for sure referencing Vex radiolaria, which are microscopic, silica-based organisms. It seems like whatever aliens that were on board the ship were carrying Vex radiolaria. We know they had some sort of liquid, which could be similar to the liquid that is Vex radiolaria. The figures with the imposing burly triangular frames were not Vex frames themselves. These aliens definitely weren't the Vex that you think of when you think of Vex. They were for sure something else. This is because Vex don't have ships like that. They don't pilot around spacecraft. And what little description we have of these aliens also does not match the Vex. And yes, these aliens are described as being imposing and having a triangular structure at the top, which could match the Vex. But the other description of burly features and the presence of seemingly tough, thick skin points to these entities being something else. Most Vex are slender and skeletal, and they do not have skin, they have metallic frames. And I really think the redacted word in that tough, thick, redacted sentence is skins, because the number of boxes on the redacted word is 5, the same number in the word skins. But somehow, these aliens were carrying the Vex radiolaria, and the DEO started to research it. At the end of this entry, Purnell says how even though the Diablo-Ray suits seem to confirm extraterrestrial life, the DEO is already looking at the next frontier, which is transdimensional travel. Memoranda, 1966. This entry jumps 4 years ahead to 1966, and it's a memoranda, a series of messages directed to Victor Falkner and his Dead Zone team. The first message is from Dr. Widoslaw Ostrowski in the taxonomy department, who is responding late to Victor because the entire department is losing it since Lewis's disappearance. Next is from Karen Clark, from accounting, who says that Project Junction Advance, again the one that got approved in 1961, is receiving additional funding. Dr. William Moffat then says that the scope of Junction Advance is being changed to now focus on, quote, safeguarding human beings suffused in strange matter, or in other words, humans being spread through this exotic extra-dimensional material. Strange matter is a material associated with the Nine. It's a material that the DEO have found at many strange temporal sites and anomalous areas that we've come to know are related to the Nine. For instance, strange matter seemed to be involved with the assassination of JFK, and we found our own strange matter in Destiny as well. You can find strange matter, these red, eclipse-energized crystals, among the many distorted destinations. And we'll come to see that the DEO seem to be investigating distortions as well. But essentially, when there's occurrences with the Nine, strange matter seems to be lingering in the air. Director Moffat clarifies that this change in direction is unusual, but the circumstances demand a change. The evidence suggests that something took Dr. Davis and Agent Yero through strange matter. And as we know, Both Nella Davis and Louis Yero experienced the Nine on the same day. Yero was abducted by the Nine when interacting with the unknown phone, and Davis was killed shortly after. In the memoranda, Dr. Yumei Lee of the Strange Matter Department then says that they've logged traces of strange matter around both the phone Louis was taken by and around the intersection where Nella Davis disappeared. So, when there's 9 anomalies, there's strange matter. This entry also confirms that Lodi and Ikora were abducted and killed seemingly sometime in 1966. Pocket Notebook, 1966. This entry is a few notes from Victor Falkner as he works on Project Junction Advance, and it lists all the issues he's having with it. He first writes about how samples of strange matter degrade super quickly, and how if Louis and Nella were alive when they were taken, they would have died within a matter of minutes. He notes how it's difficult to store strange matter for any usable amount of time, and notes that his team can barely coax together enough to stay on a slide. And so, he can test pieces here and there, but to test a whole suit like he intends, he'll have to wait until the other departments give up some strange matter. He talks about how Conway, someone who is working in another department, brags about how his team got another public patent approved. It's, quote, the 4th this year alone that they've reverse engineered from their suit. Falkner begs him for a material sample to test with Conway just laughing in his face. But Falkner notes that pride is not a result. They're all working towards the same goal here. They're trying to get their friends back. And some people, like Conway, are doing it just for themselves. These suits seem to refer to the suits recovered from Diablo, the ones with the Vex radiolaria. But Falkner is having trouble sourcing enough strange matter to test with. And remember, Junction Advance is a project that's goal is to protect and safeguard humans within a higher dimension. As Falkner said way back in the first entry, it's to protect humans from these extreme and horrific conditions that they might face. So his big issue is that he doesn't have enough strange matter, and with a lack of strange matter, he can't really develop his suits. Following this, Falkner writes about the dedication to Louis Yero and Nella Davis in the courtyard. Director Moffat gave a speech about their lives, and seemingly looked straight at Falkner when he said it's important to not leave their own behind, reinforcing their goal. After the speech, a bunch of unfamiliar faces race to talk to the director. He then speaks about how Althaus, another employee, has departed from the DEO, poached by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, for a weapons program based on models he developed from their suit. This is a strange detail, as it suggests that they were attempting to incorporate Vex radiolaria into weapons. Falkner sees more unfamiliar faces every month, and the disappearances are not just an internal affair, it's bigger than that. He says, quote, the director believes we will reach out into the void and find friends reaching back. Others do not share his hope. End quote. At this point, his strange matter sample degrades a little bit slower. Instead of 4 seconds, it now degrades in 9 seconds. But Falkner notes that at this rate, even if they do find their friends, the DEO will not survive long enough to finish introducing themselves. Finally, he writes about how a tall man came into the main lobby. Mr. Davis, either the husband, father, or brother of Nella Davis. This man was speaking about a lawsuit the Davis family was preparing against the DEO, and before he left, Director Moffat told him that he would bring them back. Not their bodies or a trace of their existence, they would be back fully alive. Director Moffat is fully convinced he'll be able to bring back Louis Yero and Nella Davis. It's a very noble pursuit, and the entire DEO is working to get their friends back. So that's what this entry is trying to say. It's trying to say that the DEO is focused on bringing their friends back, and that Falkner is having a really hard time getting his tests to work, because he doesn't have enough strange matter. This final bit about the lawsuit against the DEO was actually brought up in another lore tab on a ghost shell we got in Monument of Triumph. In that lore tab, we read about how a lawyer by the name of Gideon Davis approached Ben Yero and asked him to join the Davis family in pursuing legal action against the government, on the basis that the DEO lied about the disappearances of Nella Davis and Louis Yero, and that they were covering up a deeper conspiracy. These two characters would have no idea of the inner workings of the DEO, and from an outside perspective, yeah, it would seem like the DEO was hiding something huge. The fact that Lewis and Nella Davis both vanished on the same day was something to take note of. The DEO claimed that she suddenly drove off midday and never returned, but there was public evidence that Nella Davis, her car, and a train all vanished on the same day, as well as Louis Yero. And at this moment in the conversation, Ben was at the counter in Chicago, but also he was 11 years old in Lodi, Wisconsin, punching a 7th grader in the jaw, defending his brother Louis. This shows that Ben was forever impacted by the events of Assumption. This was something that he carried for his entire life, being able to experience the present moment, but also this moment way back in the past when he was 11 years old at the same time. He was nine-touched. Introduction letter, 1967. This entry, a year later in 1967, is a letter to Falkner from Dr. Annalise Meyers, the lead researcher on Project Blue Door. Meyers says how Blue Door was a project established in the early days of the DEO. It was a project dedicated to the construction of an interdimensional tunneling device that would allow for faster-than-light communications without violating the laws of cause and effect. But nothing came of this project, and it was mothballed, shut down, but preserved for later use. Early in 1967, Moffat reactivated Blue Door, believing that Dr. Davis and Yero were taken into another dimension, and he believed that the work done on Blue Door could be a way to follow them. And with the reactivation of Blue Door, they have begun to see major progress. They were able to open a tear in reality, 15 centimeters across, into another dimension, and are working toward a goal of human travel. They are facing a big issue though. When they opened the tear, it flooded their testing room with a massive amount of strange matter, enough to suggest that strange matter must be like air on the other side. No one was hurt, but all of their equipment was turned into iron. Meyers understands that Falkner is having issues sourcing strange matter, so there is an opportunity here. This entry sets up a lot of interesting stuff. Falkner now has a way to get all the strange matter in the world to test with, and Blue Door is making some pretty huge advancements. Spiral Bound Notebook, 1967 to 1968. This entry details a list of experiments conducted over the years of 1967 and 1968. And of course, Victor Falkner is writing these. Falkner first writes about the Blue Door tear, describing it as, quote, a floating hole in the curtain of our world, and the other side, Dr. Meyers says they're trying to name a new color for it, end quote. It's 20 centimeters, and 2 samples degrade between 6 and 30 seconds. The weird thing is that a larger sample mass corrodes more slowly. This doesn't make any sense to Falkner, but it's a good result. Moffat was also there to witness the tear, and he stared blankly into it without saying a word. He must have been thinking that this was the way he could reach his friends. To Moffat, he really thinks that they are on the edge of getting them back. The gateway is looking right at him. Experiment 6. The gateway is now 24 centimeters, and the sample degrades in 159 seconds. They are making progress. But now, their current issue is with materials. Research and development is unable to replicate the Diablo suits, which were flexible and strong. Falkner compares it to a diving suit that he worked on in Nareda, and seems to draw on his past experiences working in the ocean. Specifically, how a diver in the Nareda couldn't scratch their own back. Remember, Nareda was the name of the project that Falkner had worked on sometime in the past, and Falkner's work on that project was focused on the Nareda ADS, with ADS meaning atmospheric diving suits. The purpose of these suits is making contact, nothing else, and that realization was a breakthrough. They wouldn't need to be flexible in these suits. They wouldn't need to be able to scratch their own back. They just had to withstand the insane conditions of the other dimension. For a bit of clarification, Falkner is developing suits for people to wear to go into this tear, and that's why he's comparing it to a diving suit. It's like going into the ocean. Moffat came by and thanked them for their hard work, with notably dark circles under his eyes. He's been working so long and losing a lot of sleep over this entire ordeal. Experiment 14. It's now 30 centimeters, and Falkner's got a working prototype that degrades in 8 minutes and 32 seconds. This prototype refers to a prototype suit that can withstand the properties of strange matter. While the degradation time is getting better, extensive life support is impossible. But Falkner notes that the people wearing the suits and the people going beyond won't need to be there for a long time. Experiment 25. The tear now reaches 162 centimeters, 5 feet, and the prototype degrades in 12 minutes, 19 seconds. Experiment 32. Director Moffat came by and said that he would be the first one to go through the tear. This led to an argument between Meyers, Falkner, and Moffat, until they finally came to a compromise. Moffat would go through the tear alongside someone else, and also be attached to a rope. They don't have enough budget to make customized suits, and Falkner is closest to Moffat's build. So, that leaves Falkner as the one to go in with Moffat. However, Falkner accepts that, because he says, quote, "But I would be a poor scientist, indeed a poor human being, if I would risk someone else's life and not my own," end quote. With the tear open, the suits created, and the explorers chosen, there's nothing left to do but step into the unknown. Magnetic Audio-Visual Tape, 1968.
A large, mechanical ring-shaped device sits in the center of a warehouse. A deep, oscillating hum emanates from it. The hum begins to rise in frequency and pitch.
40%. 60%. Gentlemen, the test is beginning.
2 people in large protective suits move towards the device. Each suit has black lettering on the back. The lead suit reads Moth, while the other reads Foul. They are tethered by safety lines leading from their suits and connecting to something off camera. A tear opens in the center of the ring. Through the tear, the other side seems to bubble and shimmer, shifting through every color the magnetic tape can capture. Bands of static and visual distortion sizzle across the feed. Visual feed burns out.
It's talking to us.
What?
My name is William Moffat, Director of the Department of External Observations. We mean you no harm. We only wish for the safe return of the humans you took.
Director, this has never happened before. It may not be safe to approach.
Dr. Nella Davis and Agent Louis Yero have families, loved ones, friends, hoping day by day for their safe return. Whatever you need from them, ask it of me instead. They are my subordinates, and my capacity as director...
Gravitational anomalies detected. It's transmuting the gateway.
Already? The shielding. We should have another 6 minutes.
Falkner, damn it. The line, why won't it? Give them back. Give them all back.
Director? Oh God, Director, cut his line and get back. We have to cut power to Blue Door.
Somebody grab me! I'm not letting him go.
Visual feed returns. The tear has expanded past the device's boundary. Half of the machinery has sunk through it. The air writhes. Moffat stands less than 2 feet from the tear, feet braced. He grips his own safety line in one hand and Falkner's in the other. Falkner's safety line leads into the tear. Although the line is taut, Moffat seems unable to pull Falkner back. Instead, he is being dragged towards the tear, inch by inch. Moffat looks into the tear. Falkner's scream continues. Moffat releases his own safety line and plunges through the opening.
So that entry was a lot. But before we unpack everything, let's take a look at the final entry of this lore book, straight from director William Moffat himself. Torn Journal page, 1968.
December 12th, 1968. When does heroism become vanity? I've had a long 6 weeks to think. Nothing else to do, really. Angie might have trained medical a little too well, but if I tell her that, she'll put me back on bed rest. So, when does heroism become vanity? When does determination become mania? When does sacrifice become self-satisfaction? When is enough enough? If there's a taller mountain, I have to climb it. 6 weeks ago, I'd call that ambition. Angie said they won't know if they can discharge Falkner for another 10 months. It turned his kidneys into titanium, a heart valve to gallium. Apparently, it treated his bone cancer early though. It's all strontium now. John told me again that I need to let it go. Angie too. Stiller, Perlman, Lee.
Director? Oh god, Director, cut his line and get back. We have to cut power to Blue Door.
The moment they were taken. Nothing of our world can survive in that formless beyond. I swore I'd bring them back. Is it still for them? Or is it for me? Fine. Let's say it's just for me, my pride. I don't give a damn, and I'm never going to let it go. I can't. I won't. But Director Moffat, head of the DEO, must. Falkner went with me because I believed, and he believed me. If the only way to get them back is to throw other lives into that tear, let it have them. I won't make that trade. Not ever. I'll unbend the projects I've pointed in that direction. Reallocate manpower and funding. Get back to the mission. But I'm not letting them go. I will find them, and I will bring them back.
So, Project Junction Advance created these suits that were able to withstand the properties of the Beyond for just a few minutes, and Project Blue Door carved a doorway into this unknown realm. In 1968, the DEO managed to open a tear into another dimension, and something spoke back. An unknown voice that only produced a cacophony of sounds. It made the noises of Drylphytes cinereus, a type of American tree frog, noises of Vulpes vulpes, the red fox, sand dunes, and a superb lyrebird imitating a motor. After these animalistic noises, the voice changed into a number of human voices blended into a chattering crowd. Then suddenly, there were gravitational anomalies, and the gateway was transmuted, which sucked Falkner inside as he was hit with a piece of metal, and ultimately, it changed the properties of his body. Moffat and Falkner managed to escape the pull of this unknown thing, but they were changed forever. Falkner was physically altered, as Moffat told us. Some of his organs were changed completely to titanium and gallium, and Moffat, as head of the DEO, was forced to cease operations on this endeavor. Even though he wanted to save his friends, he cannot risk more people. But deep down, in his heart of hearts, Moffat will never give up searching. The man who is the director of the DEO cannot condone this any longer, but the man who is William Moffat will continue to search for his lost friends. So, what really happened? Of course, they opened a tear into some sort of space belonging to the Nine. We know this because of the nature of the tear, and how it transmuted Falkner. That is a symptom of the Nine. When you interact with the Nine, there is a chance that your chemical and atomic properties get changed, or you just experience the feeling of different elements. Lodi and Oren talk about this in The Edge of Fate, and how as being an emissary of the Nine, they felt these different chemical and atomic changes. So, this is a symptom of the Nine. But what were those sounds meant to be? The sounds of animals and human voices blending into a single crowd. I believe that was 3 attempting to communicate through the tear. Of course, 3 didn't have a vessel, no body to use, but she could have had that tear, and through it, produced sounds relating to Earth. the sounds of animals chirping, and the voices of humans. I think it was 3 trying to be friendly and to reveal herself to the DEO by using sounds and noises that are familiar to humans. But suddenly, the gateway shifted and became a lot more aggressive and violent. Perhaps it was an outer orbit taking control and getting angry. And I think these tears are meant to relate to the distortions we see across the destinations, which we know are products of the outer orbits. I say this because that's where we get the DEO weapons, and it's also where we get strange matter as a material. And it's also where you can find the pages for this lore book. They are found at distorted destinations. These distortions act and look very similar to the tear we see in this lore book. A floating hole in the curtain of our world is an apt description of what we see in Destiny. It literally is a floating hole in the curtain of these worlds. Without a doubt, these distortions were content for Shattered Cycle, or stuff leading into Shattered Cycle. And I can imagine these were present in Old Chicago too. So, while that's the final entry for Recovered Materials, Old Chicago, there is one final entry that concludes this entire story. Let's take a look at the lore tab for Fafnir. The yellow warning light gave way to green, and director William Buck Moffat's knees creaked as he entered containment with a slice of cake. At the far end of the room was a massive empty frame, the air inside thick like desert heat. He offered 4 pencils on the ground before it.
Figured I'd sneak away from the party to say goodbye. You be polite to my replacement. He's trying to build you a body, like a real boy. Comprehension confirmation. What is your name?
The pencil on the far left turned to silvery striated lithium.
Confirmed. Last chance, Lee.
2 objects blinked into existence on the ground in response. Lee always gave back 2. One of hers, one of his. A varsity jacket gifted to Teresa Kierczynski, and Dr. Davis's gardening journal. Moffat had memorized the objects that disappeared when they did. His briefcase, her car, the USS Hornet, and seethed over decades as Lee would drip feed them back. 20 years talking to the elevated gravity levels in the basement, and all Lee would do was rummage around its lost and found. He fell quiet.
I failed them.
Moffat nudged the jacket. Yero, a mix of sadness, sentiment, and nostalgia moved him to ask one last time.
Will you send them something from me?
The second pencil turned to carbon. A yes. Moffat's shoulders unstooped as he sat straight the hell up. His hand trembled as he held up his plate. He willed his voice calm.
Can you give them this?
The chocolate cake slice, the words "Retirement Buck" in icing, paper plate, and fork vanished from his hand. He inhaled sharply. Tears slicked his cheeks, and Director Moffat beseeched the kidnapper in the basement with a wavering plea.
Tell them I tried.
This lore continues to get weirder and weirder. So this entry comes from Moffat's last day on the job as he goes into retirement. It's been at least 20 years since 1968, but possibly longer, since he's been talking to Lee for 20 years at this point. And Lee is a bit of an odd case. The flavor text, which is from General Sam Galloway, refers to Lee as an interdimensional dragon, which on the surface reads like an Ahamkara. But it's clear that Lee is a member of the Nine. Lee changes the properties of different items as a way of communication. Again, just as the Nine do. Lee is referred to as elevated gravity levels, which again is exactly what the Nine are. Dark matter entities bound to the gravity wells of our celestial bodies. And it is something considered to be interdimensional. This entry also notes how Moffat has memorized different items that have disappeared over the years, one of which is the USS Hornet CV-8. Remember, the USS Hornet is the aircraft carrier that Louis Yero investigated way back in the 1960s. And so, I think by Occam's razor, the USS Hornet is the same aircraft carrier we see on Kepler. It was brought forward in time, and that's where it ended up. Moffat understands that Lee can send objects through time, and asks it to do so with a piece of chocolate cake, acting as a message to tell his lost friends that he tried to bring them back. the objects disappear. And we know that this piece of cake did appear to Lewis. On the lore tab for an exotic ship that we got in the Monument of Triumph, Lewis writes a letter to Ikora, and the final line is this, quote, P.S. Remind me to tell you about the cake I just found. So this piece of cake that Moffat had Lee send to the future was successfully received by Lewis. So Lee is related to the Nine or is a member of the Nine in some capacity. And I think there are two possibilities here. Lee is either the member of the Nine that was bound to Earth or the member of the Nine that was bound to Thea. And I think it's more likely to be 3. But for a bit of backstory, Thea is the name of the planet that collided with the Earth when Earth was being formed. And fragments of Thea formed the moon. And some lore has told us that there was once a consciousness or member of the Nine that was bound to Thea, but was killed in this collision. And because some of the fragments of Thea got wrapped up in Earth and other bits of it formed the moon, there's a theory that Thea was split between these two objects, and some of the interdimensional consciousness of Thea somehow is on Earth still, and so that could be what Lee is. And while that's plausible, I think Lee is meant to be 3. Lee is a name that means pasture or meadow, and this being is friendly to Moffat. The two of them are friends, if you could call that their relationship. Remember, Lodi told us that 3 exists somehow beneath the remains of Chicago, and it might be because of Lee. When Lodi connects to this creature under Chicago, it feels like channeling 3. And so that's how we know there's a relation there. And when the Fafnir lore tab tells us there's elevated gravity levels underneath the DEO office that can act like a 9, I think it's fair to say that Lee is connected to 3. And the most striking piece of evidence for this is the mention of a body that is being built for Lee. And I think this body is how 3 was able to survive under Chicago, in whatever capacity it may be. Maybe Lee is a clone, a copy, or a sectioned off piece of 3, and that's what Lee is. Who knows? And I think this is something we would get answers to in the campaign. But I think Lee was given this body, and that would make Lee the creature under Chicago. The same creature that Lodi knows is connected to 3 in some way, and the same creature that is trying to claw its way out. And the same creature that had once killed Guardians. The name of the exotic, Fafnir, also seems to back this up. In Norse and Germanic mythology, Fafnir is the name of a dwarf who transforms into a hammer, the shape or form of a serpent or dragon to protect a treasure. In Norse mythology specifically, Fafnir kills his father out of greed, stealing a ring and a hoard of treasure, and then he shapeshifts into a dragon. Eventually, Fafnir is killed in both stories. This character serves as an inspiration for characters like Smaug and Gollum in Tolkien's stories of Middle-earth. And so what we have here is a character transforming himself into something larger out of greed. Perhaps this story is meant to represent what happened to Lee or 3 here. Lee seems to have been given a new body, like how Fafnir was turned into a dragon. And maybe like Fafnir, Lee stayed in the ruins of Chicago to protect something they saw as precious. Another theory posits that the successor to Moffat, the new director, bound himself to Lee, or to 3, and then he became the monster underneath Chicago. The main goal of Shattered Cycle was to first find a body that would start the process of binding the 9. Remember, to prevent extinction, we have to bind each member of the 9 to a specific body. And these bodies have to be physical, biological, organic, like in the case of Lodi. He is a human vessel, a body for the 9 to inhabit. So it's not like we could just build the 9 robots and force the 9 into them. They have to be human or biological in some way, it seems like. And what would have happened to this director echoes the story of Fafnir. Fafnir was a human who got greedy and prideful, and in the pursuit of power and fulfilling his own greed, transformed himself into a dragon, and he wasn't afraid to murder anyone to protect his wealth. So, in a similar way, the power and responsibility that comes with being the leader of the DEO might have gotten to the new director's head. In pursuit of power, money, or other selfish desires, he may have bound himself to Lee in order to protect all that he believed was rightfully his. But this wouldn't work, as this director was never meant to be someone that would contain a member of the Nine, similar to Bale. Bale is the bodily vessel for Six, but he was never meant to be a vessel. His body was never built to handle the incomprehensible nature of the Nine. So the more and more Six possessed Bale, the more his body continued to break. Bale's face is now not even recognizable, and some of his body parts have been transformed into metal. And the difference between Lodi and someone like Bale is that Lodi's body was built to be a vessel for the Nine. He was always meant to be an emissary, and that's why he can handle all the members of the Nine possessing his body, and his body doesn't break at all. It's because his body was built to handle this. And we know that this was eventually going to culminate in Bale becoming a terrifying monster, according to some leaks. So perhaps a similar thing was going to happen to this director of the DEO. They would keep trying to force communion, and that would just destroy their body over time, just like how Bale's body was completely destroyed over time. So this is my hypothesis. The DEO had opened a tear that led to the Nine, specifically 3, and they were able to somehow contain elevated gravity levels in their basement. Moffat developed a relationship with 3, or whatever this member of the Nine is truly, which he gave the name of Lee, and he started to track the different objects that had vanished out of thin air. He developed a way to communicate with Lee with the transmutation of different objects, and ultimately, on his last day of work, Lee sent a message to the future, the piece of cake that would eventually arrive at Lodi's doorstep. Following this, Moffat's successor took control, and their idea of a body for Lee might have been either to construct something for it to inhabit, or perhaps to bind it to their own body, as an attempt to either gain power or force a symbiosis of sorts. Either way, it wouldn't work, and this new director would be horrifically transformed, mutated and turned into a monster, in a similar way in which Bale suffers from Six. No matter what body Lee took, we know it's connected to the thing under Chicago, and it was ultimately left to rot. But deep down, because it was 3 or related to 3 in some way, it knew that eventually Lodi would come to see it. I think Shattered Cycle would have also connected to the labyrinth imagery presented in Renegades. Remember, 4 said that underneath Chicago was a labyrinth, and that seems to be a reference to Daedalus's labyrinth of Greek mythology. The master architect Daedalus was tasked with constructing the labyrinth, a prison to contain the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull monster, by the order of King Minos of Crete. The hero Theseus went into the labyrinth to slay the monster, and end a ritual that caused young children to be fed to the Minotaur every 9 years. During Theseus' journey, Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos, fell in love with him, and gave Theseus a ball of thread so that he could find his way out of the labyrinth. With the help of Daedalus, Theseus managed to kill the Minotaur and escape the labyrinth. So my ultimate theory is that Shattered Cycle was going to parallel this Greek tale. Picture this. Old Chicago has become home to a vile civilization, and their society is based on a terrible cycle of torment that involves the creature underneath the city. Maybe it's not as awful as the human sacrifices to the Minotaur, but something that is ritual and cyclical, happening at certain time intervals, and of course, related to the Nine. This is where you'd get the title of Shattered Cycle. You'd be shattering this terrible cycle of evil. This civilization could be led by the King of Chicago, someone that would parallel King Minos of Crete. Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos, has to be a figure that aids us on our journey, and they have to belong to the king. So perhaps either 3 or the ghost of the King of Chicago parallels to Ariadne. And we know that the King of Chicago is a light bearer because the Ghost Community Theater play states that the King of Chicago has a ghost, and that ghost's name is Fool. And the monster under Chicago would parallel the Minotaur. If we're operating under the theory that the monster under Chicago was once the successor to Moffat, then this monster would be a half-man, half-nine-touched mutant, just like how the Minotaur is a half-man, half-bull figure. I don't really know what this would look like, because this has never happened before, but I'd imagine it would be something very similar to what would have happened to Bale. The wrongful 9 possession would ultimately destroy the human body and transform it into something else, a monster. The labyrinth would be the ruins of the DEO offices, the very same place that 4 told Lodi about, being described as right under Adams and Wabash, and having a well at the bottom of the labyrinth. And of course, our guardian parallels Theseus, the hero who has to put an end to this madness and shatter the cycle of torment. To add even more onto this, one of the first video games ever developed by Bungie was Minotaur: The Labyrinths of Crete. This game was developed by Jason Jones and Alex Seropian, while they attended the University of Chicago. Chicago was the location of Bungie's first office, and so this would be a callback to some of the ancient Bungie lore. And the idea of Old Chicago in Destiny is a nod to this history, and so I think it's pretty fitting. I'd imagine that this would have been the main story, us dealing with the King of Chicago, this civilization, and ending the cycle. But as we'd progress through the labyrinth, I believe we'd discover something far more sinister. I believe we would have discovered an element involved in a mystery that's been running in the background for years, and a mystery that involves the Winnower himself. This is the Revision Zero mystery. The Revision Zero is a pulse rifle we first acquired during Season of the Seraph, but its creation and the parties it connects to reveal a larger mystery. Let's first examine the history of the weapons manufacturer, Hawkeye. Before the City Age, and even before the Golden Age, Hawkeye existed as Hawkeye Heavy Industries. They were based out of Chicago, practically neighbors to the Department of External Observations. And these two organizations would frequently collaborate with each other. We know that Hawkeye Heavy Industries was involved in the development of gravity-based weapons in Chicago during the pre-Golden Age. The DEO developed the Graviton Lance, seemingly in collaboration with Hawkeye, and that pulse rifle is a gravity-based weapon. And Ikora was also involved in the creation of the Graviton Lance. In the Golden Age, Hawkeye began to collaborate with Braytech, and together, they investigated the K1 anomaly on the moon, an artifact related to darkness. The K1 anomaly gave the K1 research team stationed on the moon various hallucinations and visions, and these visions even manipulated the head researcher into believing in the philosophy of the final shape, crying out the words "majestic, majestic" as she fell into darkness. The K1 anomaly also predates the Traveler. It had arrived on the moon sometime before the Traveler came to Sol. So seemingly, the darkness visited us first. And I don't think this visitor was the Witness, because the visions of darkness related to the Winnower's view of the final shape, not the way the Witness views it. And remember, the K1 anomaly predates the arrival of the Traveler. It's that old. It was underneath the moon long before the Traveler ever came to the solar system. So if the Witness had visited us before in the deep past, I think it would have just annihilated us, regardless of whether we were visited by the Traveler, since it had killed countless civilizations, and it didn't care if they were visited by the Traveler or not. And we cannot forget the usage of the words "majestic, majestic," the calling card of the Winnower. Majestic, majestic has appeared countless times over the years, and every time we hear those words, it comes from the Winnower. All the evidence points toward the K1 anomaly being connected to the Winnower, meaning that he visited us first somehow. But working with Braytech, Hawkeye tried to recreate the power of the anomaly, but production would ultimately hit a roadblock until they were given the data for Synthweave, and this resulted in the creation of the Revision Zero pulse rifle, which uses a Hawkeye frame, given concept art that clearly showcases this. So in short, the Revision Zero was created using darkness materials from the K1 anomaly. Fast forward to Season of the Seraph, we start to work with Fenchurch Everest in constructing the Revision Zero, and he said this, quote, "It turns out that this corporation was heavily invested in the Golden Age pursuit of xenoarchaeology, the concept that the Sol system had been visited by aliens and left evidence behind. So Hawkeye Heavy Industries was interested in xenoarchaeology, the idea that the solar system was previously visited by aliens and they left evidence behind. The K1 anomaly fits this exact description, an artifact that predates the arrival of the Traveler. This is evidence of some ancient alien related to the darkness, and ultimately related to the Winnower. And Hake was pursuing this thread. Next up, the Icebreaker. On this Exotics lore tab, we read about an investigation conducted by Shayura, a Trials of Osiris veteran and one of the Guardians who ventured into the catacombs beneath Chicago. She survived the encounter with the Chicago monster, but was left completely traumatized as some of her friends were murdered right before her. And on this lore tab, Shayura visits an old Hake facility. On the door to this facility is a glyph that is the same symbol on the Revision 0. She goes into the facility, and the person giving her comms tells her to look for records where Hake and Braytech overlap. While she doesn't find any concrete evidence, she does discover that Hake's Golden Age predecessor was located in Chicago, and there they developed gravity-based weapons. Notably, the labyrinths under Chicago are described as tombs. So she was looking for records regarding the Braytech-Hake collaboration, and most likely to find stuff regarding the K1 anomaly, since that was the big area of their joint venture. So this entry brings up a lot of interesting stuff, but first, what is this symbol that was carved into both the Revision 0 and also the facility door? It's this sort of anchor type shape, and to me, it looks like a symbol that could belong in the Witness's iconography. But while the Revision 0 symbol and symbols related to the Witness look similar, they aren't exactly the same. They have their own distinctions. For example, the Revision 0 symbol is symmetrical, whereas these Witness symbols aren't. And this makes sense given how these entities view the final shape. The Winnower views the final shape as this inevitable, dominant pattern, something simple, and that's reflected in this symbol. It's symmetrical and simple. The Witness views the final shape as the calcification of everything in the universe into a state that it deems perfect. It doesn't want to reduce the universe into one singular thing, but freeze it in a perfect place, and that's reflected in its symbols. They're a bit more complex and sprawling. They're asymmetrical. And on the concept art for the Revision 0, this symbol is labeled as Hake logo. So it could have been the logo for Hake Heavy Industries before they transitioned into their classic orange brand. I mean, you can't expect a company to keep the same imagery and color scheme over hundreds of years, but still, this symbol carries a lot of darkness to it, as does the vibe of the entire weapon. It feels like something that would have came from the pyramids. And I think this is to hammer in the point that it's connected to the Winnower, because the K1 anomaly is an artifact of the Winnower. Both the Witness and the Winnower are based in darkness, and have ideas regarding the final shape, but they are still distinct and different. And I think that division is demonstrated in the differences in the symbology. Both look similar, since both are of darkness, but because they are of conflicting philosophies, they are different. My theory is that the Winnower influenced the leaders at Hake Heavy Industries, and we see that reflected even in their old logo. So in short, the Revision 0 was created by Hake and Braytech as they researched the K1 anomaly, making the weapon a product of investigations into darkness. Hake was interested in xenoarchaeology, and the K1 artifact is evidence for that exact idea, that something alien came to the solar system before the Traveler. So that then begs the question, how does this all relate to Shattered Cycle? Let's take it even further. We know that Hake Heavy Industries was based in Chicago, so during Shattered Cycle, we'd probably spend some time in their offices. And I'd imagine their history and their ideas of xenoarchaeology might have played a role in the story. And I think we can already piece some of that story together thanks to Monument of Triumph. Let's first take another look at the tombs of Chicago. Renegades introduced us to the Praxic temples around the solar system, and most importantly, how they were all sites of darkness and places related to the pyramids. We see this on Europa and Venus, as both temples feature pyramid architecture. And what was found in the Temple of Europa is very interesting. Before Bale became involved with Six, he was first studying the darkness. His studies led him to Europa, where he discovered something fascinating. Quote, "In the heart of the temple was a great sepulchre that contained a fantastic, glittering crystal. From my studies, I knew it to be a crystal of stasis, a paracausal manifestation of darkness, that power to which I had spent years attuning my body and mind. I touched it and invited power in. That word sepulcher is very important. A sepulcher is a place of burial, a tomb. Bale discovered a tomb related to darkness that held a manifestation of stasis. And we find that sepulcher in Destiny. It's this giant rectangular sort of structure. And the sepulcher was illustrated in some very interesting concept art. In this concept art, there is a hooded figure in the center of the room, rising out of what looks to be a rectangular, liquid-like structure, which is being melted away to reveal the figure. This material was keeping the figure hidden, buried. This material is leaking out into the room, and is seemingly linked to smaller rectangles in the room. And that figure is very interesting, because it is the same exact figure featured in old models that were never used for Destiny, but have been speculated to be related to the Veil. Not the Veil you know from Lightfall, but the Veil from the old Destiny 3. If you didn't know this, Destiny 3 was in development near the end of the 2010s, but it was cancelled, and the ideas for Destiny 3 were splintered off into the expansions of Beyond Light, Witch Queen, Lightfall, and the Final Shape, with some ideas being changed completely, and others manifesting in the expansions in different ways. But the original vision for Destiny 3 was completely scrapped. Around 2019, leaks for Destiny 3 came out that revealed we'd be facing an enemy race of astro demons called the Veil. The Veil were meant to be the true ancient enemies of the Traveler, led by a king and queen, who were ultimately servants of the Winnower. Now, these leaks came out before the ideas for the Witness, the Disciples, and the Dread were ever a thing. The ideas for the Veil were loosely formed into what we got in Destiny 2. But originally, we were going to face an enemy race called the Veil, and we actually have quite a lot of concept art that seems to feature them. So why now, after all this time, did the concept artists decide to reintroduce those ideas back into Destiny 2 with the Renegades concept art? Let's keep it going. Remember how the catacombs of Old Chicago were described as tombs in the Icebreaker lore tab? I think the usage of the word tombs is very important, because Bale discovered a sepulcher on Europa, a type of tomb. And the Icebreaker lore tab was about an investigation into the Hake-Braytek connection. So essentially, the anomaly on the moon, a research into darkness. And I keep bringing up the Icebreaker lore tab because it came out with the Vespers Host dungeon. Destiny dungeons usually tease the future. They always foreshadow the next story, and we saw that with Vespers Host pretty explicitly. It's where we first heard Lodi, and that led right into the Edge of Fate. And the Icebreaker lore tab was focused on Old Chicago, the Hake-Braytek connection, and seemingly the anomaly. So all of that was on the writers' minds, because they were trying to tease the next phase of Destiny. So I'm hammering in the point that the use of the word tombs is very important. So I think the DEO offices were built on top of one of these darkness tombs. The labyrinth that 4 calls us to is not just the ruins of the DEO headquarters, but a labyrinth of ancient darkness. The question is, what would we find at the well, at the bottom of the labyrinth? And I think the answer is some sort of relation to the Winnower and the Veil. Including the figure that relates to the Veil in that Renegades concept art wasn't a mistake. Clearly those ideas were on the artists' minds when they were coming up with these new ideas. And that takes us to the Monument of Triumph, where we get this armor set, the Cruel Electrum set, with Electrum being the name of an alloy used by ancient civilizations, like ancient Egypt. And the armor set is without a doubt inspired by the old concept art of the Veil. Take a look at this Titan armor. It looks just like this statue, and its shoulders are identical to this enemy. Many believe this enemy to be a cut Scion boss for the Root of Nightmares raid, but in the files, it's categorized as a Veil. Many Veil concept art pieces feature a chest hole, which this armor also shares. And of course the horns of the Veil boss are just like the horns on the Warlock set, and take the different textures, colors, etc. that match other places of old darkness imagery. The devil's in the details. And then look at the ghost shell. It's called Curse Eternal, and its description is for ghosts whose rest is better left undisturbed by unwary visitors. What does that sound like? an ancient tomb, or take the ship Idol of Ancestors. One of the ideas for the Veil is that they connected to a precursor race, the idea that humanity descended from the enemies of the darkness. I think Shattered Cycle would have ultimately led to a reveal regarding the anomaly, these tombs across Seoul, Hokke Heavy Industries, and the Winnower itself. And I think that we'd get this Veil-esque armor from Shattered Cycle. Maybe it was the raid armor. I think because of End of Service, the armor had to be pushed up to the Monument of Triumph and reconfigured to fit the Trials of Osiris. But its design inspirations and connective tissue to Destiny's past are clear as day, at least to me. And my final bit of evidence to back this up comes straight from the lore itself. Recall the Les Diablerie incident. Something crash-landed in the Swiss Alps, the DEO went to investigate, and they found large aliens alongside Vex Radiolaria. Which, by the way, remember that Hokke got some Radiolaria to play around with. But it still begs the question, what were those aliens? Let's recall their description that's featured on the Melas Panoplia. Quote, "The redacted themselves were imposing, burly, redacted structure, redacted at the top, with redacted in a triangular redacted, and tough, thick, redacted. Redacted are clearly redacted, confirming our foundational hypothesis. The redacted are being redacted at our redacted. Imposing, burly, a triangular formation at the top, with seemingly tough and thick skin. That reads to me like a description of the Veil, and this piece of concept art fits that exact description. A heavy, burly, imposing figure that towers over this guardian, with a triangular formation around its head, and definitely tough and thick skin. And then after it describes their physical structure, the text then says that the discovery of these aliens confirmed a foundational hypothesis. How could there have been a foundational hypothesis if these things were seemingly random? Unless they connected to something they were already interested in. Xenoarchaeology. The idea that aliens came to Seoul before us, and perhaps they connected to the tombs that they had discovered underneath Chicago. Perhaps they saw these figures and connected them to the mysterious tombs right under their home, and that could have been the confirmation of their hypothesis, that there was in fact a direct link. And what did they find aboard their ship? Radiolaria, which is the Vex, which is another connection to the Winnower. The Vex are programmed to convert the entire universe into Vex. They want to write themselves into the very fabric of the universe so that the only thing that remains are them. They're in search of fulfilling the pattern, which the Winnower deems as perfect. The Winnower envisions the final shape as the idea of a singular dominant pattern coming out on top. It's what the Winnower desired when it played the flower game, and it continues to proclaim that this final shape is inevitable. And the idea is that the Vex are the manifestation of that dominant pattern from the flower game before time. What the Winnower viewed as the final shape became the Vex in the universe. They are determined to fulfill that dominant pattern. And so of course these aliens that seem to connect to the Winnower also were carrying Radiolaria, the fulfillment of that very philosophy. And that brings me to my final piece of evidence, the final scene in the Monument of Triumph, where the Winnower possesses Lodi and gives us a final message, prophesying a showdown at the end of time between our Guardian and the Winnower. The thing is, I don't think this moment was meant to originally take place in the EDZ. I don't think this moment was ever meant to be a part of the Monument of Triumph. I think this was meant to be the cliffhanger ending of Shattered Cycle that would have kicked off the rest of the Fate Saga. End of Service forced the developers to scramble, and I think they knew this scene was too important to leave on the chopping block. It definitely was not made in a matter of weeks. It's something they'd worked on for a while, since it involved a variety of departments and Lodi's own voice actor. So they didn't cook this scene up because of End of Service. It's something that would have fit into their entire plan of the Fate Saga. And the reason I think that this moment was meant to be in Shattered Cycle is the nature of the scene. We're first meant to hear about this meeting with the Winnower on a lore tab for a ship, which tells us the story of Shiro crashing into the EDZ and informing Honor to warn our guardian that it is waiting for us at the Shard of the Traveler. After reading this, we then have to do the necessary objectives to then unlock this meeting at the Shard of the Traveler. And then when we go to the Shard of the Traveler, we see Lodi standing right in front of it. And then he's possessed by the Winnower. The thing is, why is Lodi here? Why did he travel all the way to the EDZ? Because he wasn't possessed until we approached him. So again, what took Lodi to the EDZ? What compelled him to go there? I don't know. I think it's a little odd to place this moment in the EDZ, and especially in an update like Monument of Triumph. That's why I think it was originally meant to be in Shattered Cycle, and End of Service forced it to be included in this update, and they placed Lodi in the EDZ because it had the sort of atmosphere they were going for. But I think this vignette was something that was involved in the story of Shattered Cycle. I think we'd go down into the depths of the labyrinth, discover a dark tomb, and ultimately find the Winnower, who would possess Lodi and give us this message.
Ending with me. Showdown at the end of time between champions of dark and light. Don't worry. When it's over, I won't abandon you. Take a breather. Take your libations. Let that vigor seep back into your bones. Get hungry.
The Fate Saga was heading toward the Winnower. And I know that everything with the Veil is a pretty crazy theory, and it might be a little out there. Don't take my word as fact, and I can certainly be wrong. But given that this is the end of Destiny 2, I think it's a fun thing to think about, because everything with Hawkeye, Chicago, and the Anomaly seems to be connected. And the inspirations are clear. At the very least, the developers were thinking about the old Veil designs. Now, does that mean they were going to introduce a new Darkness faction at some point? Who really knows? But it's fun to think about the what-if scenario. I don't know. What do you think about everything with Chicago, Hawkeye, the crash site in the Swiss Alps, and everything in between? It's really such a shame that Shattered Cycle was so abruptly cancelled and deleted, as the developers were cooking up a really fascinating story. My hope is that whatever they had made for Old Chicago and this expansion could be repurposed into the next iteration of Destiny. And if that's Destiny 3, then Old Chicago would make for a pretty awesome Earth destination. Destiny 1's starting location was the Cosmodrome, Destiny 2's was the EDZ, and Destiny 3's could be Old Chicago. Bungie has had a history of repurposing content for future expansions and releases. For example, the EDZ was meant for Destiny 1, and it got repurposed into Destiny 2. So this is something that could seriously happen. I just hope the next Destiny project gets the green light, and that hope will never burn out. That seems to be one of the themes of Shattered Cycle as a whole. Despite all of the hardship, all of the darkness that filled Moffat's life, he never lost hope. He always hoped that one day he would see his lost friends, that he would get them back. And so like Moffat, we have to have hope too. I have hope for the future. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you channel members for your continued support. Let me know your thoughts about this one down in the comments. I'm really curious as to what you all think about all of this lore, and what you think Shattered Cycle might have looked like. If you have any theories, ideas, speculations, whatever, put them in the comments and we can start a conversation. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, and click the video on screen right now for more. And again, thank you for watching.